A Goodyear welted shoe is good enough for most people. It's durable, water resistant, and easily resolable. But what if you could have a shoe that's more durable, not just water resistant but waterproof and equally resolable? If you haven't already guessed, I'm talking about the Norwegian Welt, aka the Storm Welt. And if you stick around, you'll also learn how to tell if your shoes are hand-lasted. First of all, this has nothing to do with a Norwegian split-toe derby, which refers to a derby with a seam running vertically down the front of the shoe. Now, the Norwegian stitch refers to the stitch that connects the insole to the uppers, and sometimes to a storm welt, but more on that soon. In terms of style, there are 4 main variations and they can run halfway, 3/4 or fully round the shoe. While the terms Norwegian welt and storm welt are used interchangeably, there's a nuanced difference between a Norwegian stitch and a Norwegian welt. Just because a shoe has a Norwegian stitch does not mean it has a Norwegian/storm welt. And just because a shoe has a Norwegian/storm welt does not mean it has a Norwegian stitch. Okay, if your brain is already fried, take your time to digest this next part. The first variation is having a Norwegian stitch but without a storm welt. Here, the Norwegian stitch connects the insole and the uppers, with the uppers folding outwards, similar to a stitch-down construction. Next, a separate stitch connects the edge of the uppers to the midsole. And finally, the edge of the midsole is stitched to the outsole. The second variation is having a storm welt but without a Norwegian stitch. FYI, a storm welt refers to the strip of leather that's folded up against the uppers. In this variation, notice that the uppers are not folded outwards, unlike in the previous example. Like in a Goodyear welted shoe, a stitch connects the insole to the uppers and then to the inside of the welt. You won't be able to see this stitch from the outside except for the stitch connecting the storm welt to the outsole. Overall, this construction is similar to a Goodyear welted shoe, the only difference being the style of the welt. Finally, we have storm welts that are Norwegian stitch. Depending on the region in Italy, this construction is also known as Tirolese, Pettivegna, or Goiser. Here, the Norwegian stitch passes through the insole, then through the uppers and out of the storm welt. A separate stitch then connects the welt to the uppers, midsole, and outsole. Okay, now that you've understood all that, you might be wondering how this translates to a better shoe. Well, sewing the Norwegian stitch is a time-consuming step invented by the Italians over 200 years ago. Obviously, an Italian lineage doesn't necessarily make a shoe better, but because it takes so long to complete this step, it drives up the cost of the shoe. Therefore, it's not worthwhile to sew the Norwegian stitch on, say, a cheaper insole with a canvas strip, like what you often find in Goodyear welted shoes. Also, a canvas strip is often the first thing to break down, which will ruin the Norwegian stitch. For this reason, when sewing a Norwegian stitch, many shoemakers prefer the more artisanal route, that is, carving a channel on the leather insole and hand welting the shoe. Not only is this more artisanal, but also more durable since the channel will forever stay intact, thus preserving the Norwegian stitch. On the other hand, if a brand chooses to attach a storm welt but without a Norwegian stitch, like in the second example earlier, the steps to manufacture the shoe would be similar to that of a Goodyear welted shoe. And given the US and UK's competency in manufacturing Goodyear welted shoes, this explains why many shoes that are storm welted but not Norwegian stitch are often made in these regions. Side note, if you spot a hole at the back of your shoes, don't panic. It's not a defect, and the only reason it's there was because a shoemaker used a nail to attach the upper to the last, which tells you that the shoe was hand-lasted. In terms of resoling a Norwegian stitch shoe, because the uppers and stitch holes are fully exposed, your cobbler will have to restitch through the same holes, all by hand. Although it's labor intensive, it's pretty simple, so any reputable cobbler should be able to do this. So if you're completely sold on the Norwegian construction, then here are some brands to consider. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Until next time, stay subtle.